5 years ago, I came to Amsterdam for a date. When I arrived here, I discovered a city buzzing with life, and I fell in love. First with the city, and eventually with my boyfriend. I remember being amazed by the amount of people riding their bicycles and the way they seemed to interweave so beautifully, as if everyone was connected to everyone else. At the time, I was doing an internship with an environmental think tank in Freiburg, widely recognized as one of the most sustainable cities in the world. There, people often talked about the way they ride their bicycles to save the planet. So when I arrived here and saw all these bicycles, I thought I had come to a city of virtuous environmentalists, relentlessly pursuing a low-carbon lifestyle. But to my surprise, in my first conversations with locals, I learned that the Dutch are not particularly green. They ride their bikes because by design it is simply the most convenient, the fastest, the cheapest way to get around. So I became fascinated with what I perceived to be this uniquely people-friendly city and sustainable city, and I wanted to learn more. So a couple years later, I enrolled in the Urban Planning Masters at the University of Amsterdam. During my thesis, I learned that not too long ago, Amsterdam was a city disconnected by cars and bad planning, much like most cities around the world today. So tonight, I want to tell you how Amsterdam managed to reinvent itself as a city that connects people. And I'd like to thank Thomas Schleiper, who's in the audience today, for visualizing the topics that I like to talk about. And you'll see some of his great photos tonight. Now, these days, there's a lot of talk about connected cities, with governments and companies racing to build the next hyper-efficient, smart city of the future. The idea of a smart city is to leverage digital connectivity to help address urban issues like congestion and pollution. One of the most popular examples is that of autonomous vehicles, which by communicating with each other via clever algorithms, should be able to continue moving without having to stop at traffic lights, thereby preventing congestion, as you see in this MIT video. This is one vision of a connected city. It is expensive, it is complex, and quite frankly, no one really knows if it's going to work. You also notice that in this vision, there is no space for people to walk or bike or be in public space. But there is another way to create a connected city. In my work with international delegations who come to Amsterdam to learn how they can make their cities more sustainable and smart, I often show them how this interweaving flow is already a reality here in Amsterdam. It isn't achieved through connected cars, but through connected people. And here you see this rich connectivity that experts expect will be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to achieve with self-driving cars. And it turns out that it is actually through these interactions, through eye contact, and through giving right of way, that we build trust and community and social cohesion in cities. And that just doesn't happen if we were all going to be in metal boxes. So Amsterdam is actually emerging as a smart city leader precisely because its approach is to use new technologies to enhance the existing urban connectivity, not to replace it. And that might seem obvious, but not too long ago, Amsterdam took a very different approach to thinking about the kind of city it wants to be in the future. And you see here this vision of modernity that Amsterdam borrowed from the Americans in the 1960s and 1970s. And while this particular vision of the redesign of Surinameplein and Overtoom was never implemented, other streets and squares previously used for public interaction and for markets were converted into freeways and parking lots and disconnected communities. And as Amsterdam pursued this car-centric approach, the increase in traffic accidents and fatalities also increased. So Amsterdammers had a revolution and demanded a return to a more livable city. And you see here one of the most influential groups, the Stop the Child Murder campaign, which demanded safe streets for children to be able to walk and bike to school and to play in their neighborhoods. And it took over a decade of campaigning and demonstrations and guerrilla action, but finally the work of Amsterdammers paid off because the government, by the 1980s, started shifting power from people inside the car to people outside the car. For example, by creating a vision for a bicycle network. And here you see the result of 4 decades of incremental transformation from a city that tried to serve technology to a city that serves people. Today, almost 70% of trips within Amsterdam are on foot and on bike. And this is precisely what gives Amsterdam this feeling of vibrancy and liveliness. So when I show these kinds of transformations to audiences in North America especially, they're immediately labeled as new urbanism, which is a movement that promotes development of cities and communities around people instead of cars. And it's really funny to call this new because there's nothing really new about it. This is actually how cities functioned for hundreds of years. And I often say that many cities can be inspired and learn from their former selves. They called themselves modernists when they threw away this people-centric approach to urban development in favor of a modern city, a city built primarily around cars and around grandiose architecture that served the egos of architects and planners and engineers more than it served communities. And here you see this vision by General Motors that was popularized during the 1939 World Expo in New York, and which has influenced so much global urban development over the past 8 decades. And it is a vision of a city as a perfectly engineered machine. And like the MIT simulation, you see that there is no space for people to walk or cycle or spend time with each other in public space. These activities were just not part of this vision for the future. And many cities around the world adopted this vision, and now they regret it because their cities are disconnected by roads that are clogged with traffic, instead of connecting and enhancing communities. And now that urban leaders realize that this is a problem, many are trying to fix it using the same top-down technocratic approach that got us into this mess, instead of working with communities to find out how they want to connect. For hundreds, in some cases thousands of years, cities have functioned as platforms for human connectivity and interaction. All great cities resemble ecosystems, which by virtue of density, diversity, and interconnectivity, make it possible for people to exchange goods and ideas. And while modern technologies can and should enhance this social connectivity, we should not pretend that we can replace it. And if you think of a technological city which promises to get you from A to B faster, a social city will give you a reason to enjoy the journey. And ultimately, what I think people can learn from Amsterdam is that that cities are malleable. And I hope that if people see that Amsterdam was not always Amsterdam, they realize that their cities can transform too. And like the 1939 World Expo inspired a vision for technologically connected cities, I hope that Amsterdam inspires a vision for more socially connected cities. And the best part about this vision, I think, is that it's not some abstract model or simulation. It is a test and proven reality of a city that is worth falling in love with over and over again. But you, AUC students, want to change the world, right? Okay, so here's your homework. Okay, in 3 steps, and friends and family can do it too, okay? So first you have to look up a photo of your home city or another city you're interested in 100 years ago. And then you have to compare it to the current situation. And then you have to think about what kind of city you want to live in 10 years from now. And perhaps most importantly, what can you do to influence that vision, to create that future? And the reason this is important is because you have to remember the reason you can ride your bike home safely tonight is because of people who got involved in shaping their streets and their community. And when you change the street, you change the world. And that's why you have to do your homework. Thank you.